Now we move on to the leaders' discussion theme, Decoding the Talent Saga, the era of power shift. The first session under this segment is Reimagining Work and Workforce, and according to a report, close to two-thirds, that is 63% of companies surveyed, plan to continue with a remote workforce or at least shift to a hybrid version. This will also need a shift in the way we work, and thereby, it is going to transform workplaces. To tell us more, the speakers for this next session are Scott Etheridge, CEO, Arise Virtual Solutions, Jason Conrad, Senior Vice President and Chief Information Officer, VMware Technologies, Subbu Iyer, Design Thinking CEO, Giger Technologies, and Akhila Krishnakumar, Independent Director, Brookfield India, REIT. Chairing this session will be Vishpala Reddy, Head of Human Resources, Philips Indian Subcontinent. Scott has been with Arise for over 10 years. Prior to taking the role of CEO, he led and managed the global financial independent business. With a passion for invention and a bias for results, Jason focuses his team on delivering great at-work experience for all, one where advanced collaboration and productivity resources help every aspiring person to the next level of performance and potential. Subbu is a strategic business and technology leader capable of creating growth through revenue and intellectual property (IP) through quad of design thinking, digital transformation, design, and innovation. Akhila was previously the President, Global Technology and Country Head India for SunGuard Solutions Private Limited. She is an experienced professional with a long industry standing, including over 18 years of experience in the field of technology. Vishpala spearheads people and talent agenda to support business growth and enable Philips in its transformation journey as health technology leader. That's a power pack panel. Over to you, Vishpala. Take it away.
Thank you, Shreya, for that very nice introduction. Happy to be here and happy to be along with this, I think, accomplished panel. And we were just talking a few seconds ago that this happens to be a super, super diverse panel. We have like CEOs, we have business heads, we have independent directors, and you have me from Human Resources. So looking forward to this. So to the panel, just to set some context, we're really excited to be hosting this interesting panel on a topic that, in my opinion, is something that's trending across mediums, right? Reimagining the work models, or AKA, as the future of work. So to get us started, what is the future of work? What does this term really mean? I think there's been a lot of conversation, especially pre-pandemic, where the focus has always been around, hey, there's artificial intelligence coming up, there is robotics, our jobs are going to go away. And I think pre-pandemic, there was so much of debate and conversation. And I think the answer is out there, right? To say that jobs could be impacted, but there will be newer skills or there will be newer roles. But however, post the pandemic, I think what we've learned is that these cognitive technologies is just one aspect of the future of work. So what we attempt to do today is to really look at these three deeply connected dimensions of an organization when it comes to the future of work. So the what, which we all know is the work, the who, which is really the workforce, right? Like what's happening there. And third, not but the least, the workplace, or where this is going to happen. And if you just look around, there's such a huge plethora of activity across all these three dimensions. There is tons of new products where we see organizations, individuals adopting to the digital ecosystem. There are lots of new interesting employment models like think flexible, think gigs, etc. There's a lot of continuity on automation, relooking just at the work design. How do you really optimize human touch points? Can you really have low touch but high engagement? We're talking about future ready skills. We're talking about being crisis ready as well as having business continuity. So there's a ton of work happening around this whole future of work, and how will this look for all of us as we go into the future? I think the other piece that we would love to see is that what does this mean, not just for individuals, not just for businesses, but also society? And has the pandemic truly accelerated progress across these three dimensions? So I think that's one theme that I will go deeper, but lots and lots of interesting sort of thought processes evolving there. I think the other thing that we've learned during reimagining the future workplace is just what motivates employees. we have learned that a ton is changing. So there have been umpteen number of studies, and most studies are talking about similar sort of trends. We have seen that millennials are actually willing to take a pay cut just if the job offers flexibility. We have seen that more employees are tending to be loyal if companies are actually giving them flexible work schedules. We're also seeing that the Gen Z, many of them are planning to switch jobs in the next year. We all discovered that in 2021, welcome to the great resignation phase. It was a new term. I don't think we knew that before 2021. So we are seeing an increased incidence of people who are quitting jobs. They're looking to do something different. And usually a decision factor sometimes could be work flexibility. So work flexibility, indeed, as they say, is becoming that attraction mantra for lots of organizations. And in the end, that takes us to hybrid, because there is no perfect hybrid model, right? And I think we all have discovered that organizations are experimenting to say, what does it mean? And there are loads of factors that determine what is the right model for both organizations as well as employees. But we all know that the worst hybrid business model is the one that's not defined, that's not communicated. So we will go deeper with our panel on that topic. And last but not least, I think given the need, there is a lot of innovation that's happening in the product, in the solution space, as companies are really looking to meet these needs of this future organization and individuals. So with that context, hopefully it's got you engaged, it's got you excited. I'm really happy to kind of go deeper into our panel. So let's get started, panel. So my first question, I'd love to start with Jason. Jason, if you look at the 3 dimensions, let's start with the first one, the one that we probably knew the most about, which is work. What? Here we've seen that there's lots of automation, there's cognitive technologies, there's chatbots, there's just so much that's happening, right? Where we talk about productivity and how work will get done in the future. So the question to you, right, as the CIO of a large organization, how do you see new technologies really changing and challenging the work that we do? How are we going to learn? How are we going to interact? And how do you just see that? Over to you, Jason.
Well, it's wonderful to be with you. I think to start with, when we talk about technology, we tend to get excited about its potential and its capabilities. But in this particular topic, it's really important to frame the people piece first and the nature of the work. So number one, let's remember we're talking about knowledge workers increasingly having that flexibility. There are many people whose work will not afford them that opportunity, especially if they're involved in logistics and restaurants and other services that require human interaction. The other thing that's really important to remember is people's home environment varies dramatically. So when we talk about providing people the option of working remotely or having flexibility, their home circumstances may not afford them privacy. They may not have excellent connectivity. They may be sharing their home with younger or older family members. So I think very important considerations as we think about the technology too, because the technology can amplify things for better or for worse. So if you think about all the various technologies that have enabled us to survive or at least sustain through the pandemic, we will see them continue to evolve into the future and give employees that flexibility if their circumstances permit. But I also think we have to remember that technology cannot replace human interaction. And by human interaction, I don't mean being on Zoom or Teams or Google Hangouts every day. I mean, in-person human interaction is critical, I think, for all of us. And that's coming from me, who's an introvert, telling you that I miss actually seeing people in real life. So I just want to frame it that way because I want to be careful that we don't think technology can solve every problem. It can't. The other thing I would say is that we have to think about hybrid work and recognizing that if you are in a knowledge business, if you are in the knowledge business and you do have the ability to offer employees flexibility, you need to remember that the technology needs to accommodate hybrid working and not defaulting back to in-person is the preference or in-person is biased or enabled in a richer way. I think one thing that's happened over the last 2 years is we've had a more even not an even, but a more even playing field. Many of us have been sat behind screens and cameras talking to each other, and that has provided much more rich information from video, like it is right now, as an example. But we've also been inhibited. Things like whiteboarding, getting around a piece of information, interacting with it, manipulating it has been harder. And that's where I think we've seen tools like Mural and Miro and others try and fill a gap, or at least try and bridge some of the challenges that exist there. But as we move to a place where more and more employees have the choice of going to a physical location and working, I worry that the people who are at home or in a remote location will again be observers rather than full participants. And I think that's something we've got to watch with the technology, making sure the technology is helping us bridge those gaps and make sure that the remote workforce is fully invested and truly able to do their best work. So chatbot technology, virtual reality, augmented reality, I think they will continue to allow us to scale. I think they will provide more rich, more nuanced experiences, which I think will be very, very powerful, but we mustn't forget the human dimension.
Awesome, Jason. Just to go probably deeper on the last comment, I was just taking some notes. So you said technology needs to incorporate hybrid, right? Like it's very interesting what you said. As you spoke about chatbots, as you spoke about augmented realities, right? Because again, as a CIO, like that's a buzzword. We all understand today, after like many years, what automation means, what robotic means. But maybe can you help like the audience think through as they think of work and as they think of augmented realities, what could that look like the future? Like, is there any example or what should they be preparing for?
Yeah. Absolutely. So let me give you a couple of very real examples. So number one, let's imagine that you work from home, but you share your home with other people. Virtual reality and augmented reality can help you create a space where you can think quietly. It can create a space where you can relax and even meditate. Remember, mental health and our well-being of our employees is critically important, especially at a time when we've seen our work days actually stretch because people have turned their commute time into work time. So thinking about how you can help employees get centered and relaxed and focused is really important. Additionally, those same technologies can be applied to bring people together. By using virtual reality, you can span time and distance by bringing people together in virtual spaces and interact. And this is not hyperbole or a future promise. This is in fact a reality at VMware. We have the capability and in fact available to our employees that they can jump into a virtual space, whether that's by a lake or sitting in a park or whatever, in virtual reality and come together. They can bring up digital and virtual tools like whiteboarding and other things to get around information together. So there are very practical applications there. It's a big shift because in the past, virtual reality was seen very much as a vertical, high-end, bespoke capability for things like cable harnesses on airplanes or on training people a very specific skill for a particular industry. Now we actually see that technology becoming more consumerized, but also having enterprise applications that actually span horizontally across an organization. I think in the chatbot space, look, we're all used to, whether it's in our companies or with third parties, using chatbots to solve problems, and it's normally very automated. But I think we've all also observed that increasingly that automation and that AI has become far more intelligent, and to the point that it's sometimes hard to discern. We're kind of get it moving much closer to that Turing experience that we've been promised.
Right. Very exciting. I mean, I could just think of, as you said, you could sit in a park and do this meeting. You can go sit next to the Eiffel Tower. Everything's possible in the augmented reality world. So thank you so much, Jason. So that was on work. So moving, right, let's go to the next dimension, which is the workplace. And I think Jason alluded to that. But Akhila, if I could turn over to you. We do know that there's a lot of experimenting happening with workplace combinations, right? You have lots of collaboration platforms. Now we have this concept of distributed teams. You have teams that have to be at work. And I think Jason alluded to all the technology advancements. So to someone who's worked very closely with organizations, I think that dabble in real estate and the workplace, how do you see the physical coordinates changing around us? Or how do you see the workplace changing around us? does physical, even matter anymore? Or how should companies and employees be thinking about the workplace, Akhila?
Thank you, Vishpala. Again, pleasure to be here. Uh, Look, I think what we managed to do in 2 weeks after the pandemic came on, by way of re-engineering work, we hadn't done in 20 years. Fact is that. So obviously, we've done a lot of crude things, shortcuts, right, to just make sure we got back to business as usual as close as we could. Having said that, uh, I don't think we've settled on a model yet. If you talk to a variety of people, you will hear all views, all across the spectrum. Some are still diehard saying, let's get back to work, enough of this. And there are some saying, I've actually gotten used to this. This is working for us. So I do think it's got a lot to do with the company culture, the nature of work, the tone from the top, and their own success with how they've dealt with the pandemic, right? Some have had horrible experiences, right? So I do think all of that is coming into conversations. But that said, I do think that the reality is hybrid is here to stay. Whether it is for convenience of employees, whether it is for the most practical thing to do, quite honestly, or just the fact that it's working. I mean, there's no reason to disband it and move back to Stone Age, right? So I do think it's here to stay. But the transition, my view, is going to be messy. It is not going to be cut and clean, and there's no single way of doing this, and we're all going to have to find our own solutions to this. But to Jason's earlier point, there is no substitute even now for the collaboration, the agility, the trust, the relationships that you form, which are so crucial, right? We have, Vishpala, you're an HR professional, you know how hard it is to retain people when you're looking them in the eye across the table, right? And trying to build a relationship. Yes. Imagine if you're not going to see them, where is that psychological contract that you can work on, right? So HR would be forever replacing the churn, right? And that's not feasible. And I do think these things will continue to matter. We have to find space for this. Having said that, I think the reality is, I speak from, because I have a ringside view for the workplace, challenges that we're seeing. There are 2-3 things that are happening to really adopt to the hybrid model, right? Whatever it comprises. But the fact is, first is to braid somewhere the digital and the physical world, right? Different formulae for different organizations, but that braiding is important, right? That's one. The second is almost a flip between open and enclosed spaces, right? Mm-hmm. What were the ratio is literally flipped, including amenitizing the spaces, right? Because you really don't need those cubicles and everybody having their seat anymore, even if it's just hot seating, whatever the solutions are. But I do think that flip has happened dramatically, right? Partly for safety reasons as well, right? The third thing I'm seeing is that work, whether the nature of workflow is fluid versus fixed, right? You're starting to see all of that. There are different organizations have different rules that, we want you here for at least 3 days a week. We don't care if you don't show up 3. But there's another kid who's going to say, I have no way to go. I'm going to come here all 6 days, right? So you'll have all of that happening. So laying that rule set with a lot of fluidity is going to be very important. And last but not the least, I think the balance that we have to find between me work and we work, for not promoting any brand here, but I think that balance is going to be very important, right? Now, you did ask me, right, is physical still relevant, right? And I want to take a bit of an Indian context here, because all what we're reading and hearing is stories from the Western world. The reality in India is that a junior software engineer, his home or his room is really not geared up for hybrid working, quite honestly, right? We already have a divide, but the junior employees are kind of forced to come to work, and the seniors can actually have a nice study and all the cool things that go with it. 6 months and we would have caused an irreparable divide. So it is not that we can go into this blindly and give choices to people. That's the Indian reality, right? The second part is that, we have to balance isolation with invasion, right? Our homes are under the public gaze, if that's how we're going to be. And we have to I don't have to explain, but we have to balance that. And I want to particularly shout out to women here. I think who are, working from home has been really hard for them. Every woman I've met is more than happy to go back to work if somebody can take care of the home. So I do think there is a lot that's happening within homes that are not discussed, talked about. But in Indian context, we know it's really hard on women, right? And I do think this has to settle somewhere, right? So they can move on with their careers and normalcy as best as they can. And last but not the least, I want to say that, whatever you say or do in organizations, there is a bias to being visible, right? To being ever present, right? People are not going to grow up overnight and say, look, I know I don't care if you are in Hawaii, but I know the work's getting done. I'm fine with it. Seeing you work hard, visibly, all that is important, again, more so for women, right? So I do think these are the realities, right? So we have to factor all of this in our workplace planning and find a solution that works for us. So it's the transition is not going to be easy. We'll probably get to level 100 very quickly, but level 400 is going to be a very steep climb, right?
Very interesting. I mean, interesting perspectives, Akila. So you're saying that you think that physical will matter in some sense, and you've spoken about braiding the physical and the digital, right? Like how do you redo your open spaces? And I love the whole Indian reality, because I think, like, especially for companies and organizations here, it's great to look at examples from different sort of contexts, but how do you contextualize that for someone who's operating here? So yeah. And also the whole focus of diversity, right? Like the needs, you have to probably meet the needs of every segment of your sort of workforce.
True.
Great. Thank you so much, Akila. So then let's move to the third dimension, which is the workforce. So we spoke about, the workplace, we spoke about the work. Now on the workforce, I wanted to probably turn this over to Scott. Now, Scott, you are from an organization that really is championing the gig economy, right? Like in some sense. So as we rethink this, who can do the work? We know there are lots of workforce models. There's lots of, again, experimentation on talent sharing. We think of gig, managed service, outsourcing, et cetera. But I think if you can talk a little bit both about how do you see these new workforce types kind of come to play? Like that's probably one part of the question. And the second part of the question is, how do you see supply and demand? Is it balanced? Do you think the pandemic has suddenly said, hey, you need to probably think even bigger and larger in looking at this diversity across the workforce? What are your thoughts, Scott?
Yeah, so I have a lot of thoughts. I think actually it's not new. Now at Arise, we've been running a gig platform for over 25 years. So we've been convincing people and brands that there is a different way to do it. It's the same problem. You have a consumer, you have a customer with a problem. It needs to be met with efficiency. So, when I hear some of the comments with Jason and Akila, I think there's some validity there. I also just am a completely different thinker in terms of what you can do in a gig platform and what you can do virtually and the efficiencies and the benefits of that, both in terms of the consumer who's at the end, the brand, as well as what we think about as a service partner. So I do think that technology is super important, but I think it's an enabler for the human talent. So I don't think, while I think there will be things that get automated, simple stuff gets automated, and you and I as consumers, everyone, we want that automation, but we're really after an experience. And we've become very much wanting high quality. We want it now. We want it to work. And so that has caused every company to rethink their entire supply chain and logistics, but then also their CX journey. And how do they think about that? But the other side of the workforce is 35% of the US is gig already. They don't think about a job. They think about the task or the work. And that is really, really critical. And so for us, we leverage our platform to bring that work to them. And while there is this view that 20 to 30% of jobs will be replaced by technology over time, I've yet to talk to a single company, to a single vendor, to a single person who doesn't have a staffing problem and or some sort of labor shortage. So there's an inflection point at some point, but I think we view the technology as enhancing the experience in a lot of cases versus replacing it and making it more efficient. I think there will be new skills. But also, we've always operated under a parameter of flexibility. So we offer freedom of choice. So for us, it's a platform where the human chooses what they work on. They choose when they want to work on it. And I think when you talk about hybrid and new models, for us, it's not new. I think for others, they're going to have to figure that out, because I think the days of telling someone this is your 8 hours and this is when you're going to go on break and this is where you're going to work, I think those days have passed. I think that even with if the labor situation changes, I still think the choice is with the human, and they want more flexibility in their lives. And so that's why we're a little bit, I hate how we got here as a society. But I'm glad that like we're looking at this inflection point. And I think it's also, it's very much like e-commerce. People will still shop in stores, but they also will do a lot of things online. The television did not go away with the invention of the internet. The radio did not go away with the invention of the television. So it's just a new model, and I think we've all adjusted to that. But I don't think, I believe that you can have a virtual environment. I do believe it is not how, moving the 2 weeks that Akila talked about, everybody can get connectivity to the home. You can move that. But running programs at scale with virtual continuous learning and a community and a platform, that's a different level of engagement than just moving people to at home. And I think as you think about crowdsourcing talent, as you think about how do you measure and attract and do it the right way and allow that flexibility, I think everyone has to rethink their model. We've been seeing this out of most Fortune 500 companies. They've accelerated that view quite sharply in the last 2 years, but we've been seeing this lift in gig for the last 10 years.
Great, very interesting. I love your example on it, like e-commerce, right? Like you still shop in stores and you shop online. So I think what you're saying is that everything will coexist, right? But you do see that the supply situation and the demand situation is probably going to try to keep in tandem. So the demand will grow, or like gig and outsourcing. I also think that you spoke about, I love the fact that you said humans choose what to work and when to work, right? In some sense, it kind of summarizes again the sentiment of the human race. And it took us, the pandemic to teach us this, right? So very interesting, Scott. And it's awesome that your company's been doing this for 25 years. So, I mean, obviously you were an early adopter of gig. So congratulations on that. Cool. So that was the 3 dimensions. And to bring us home on this, right? So I think we've had some really interesting insights on the 3 dimensions. Subbu, I want to turn over to you, right? Hearing your co-panelists, how do you see the interlinkages, right? So we're seeing the shift in work, workforce, workplace. Are they interrelated? Are we taking too narrow a view? Like, is that a big risk? It really is one dimension having an impact on the other. How do you see that all coming together, Subbu?
So Vishpala, I'm going to take the license of a design thinker. That is who I am. And so if I sound a little contrary to some of the, narratives I've heard here, all of you must excuse me, right? So let me put a few of the shifts that we are talking about, right? The first major shift, in work is sharing tasks between humans and technology. This is a major shift that we have to recognize. The second one is the workforce awakening to the possibility of aspirations. It is not enough to just talk about the Great Resignation or the ability to do whatever you want to do. But they also need a vision for what they want to do. If they're just bored of flipping burgers, graduating to becoming something different, which is not really aspiration, right?
Right.
The third thing is the workplace, is moving from on-premise to hybrid to cloud. And I think we need to see a coexistence from a workplace point of view, right? Akila mentioned a great point. I actually wanted to add a little story very quickly. I hired a very, very bright, a programmer. And when I hired him, wanted to recruit him and to work remote. But I warned him and I said, you don't have the right machine or the right connection in order to be able to execute this work. Simply because when I was interviewing him and I gave him some tasks to do, I heard his machine fan whirring. And I said, it's, it's not working, right? And he said, no. And then he tried for 2 days and then he failed. And he said, and then we had the third wave situation. And he said he can't come down to Bangalore. You know what I have done now is I have actually brought him over from Gwalior to Bangalore. He continues to work here. I've given him a better machine and he realizes something. Today, he had the opportunity to get a 1 hour lecture on algorithm building in the context of working with different people, with different, the UI, the CX and UX and UI people, and the algorithm development people. And he was actually bringing it together as a technology. And he realized that this is something that he could never, ever possibly do, being remote. So now he is confused. He doesn't know what to do, right? There is a dramatic shift, okay? And this is something that we have to recognize, is we have come up to this point on our planet where money or funds, they raised ideas, right? And now we are on the other end of the spectrum where ideas are raising money, right?
Yes.
And this is a huge impact, as we would like to see it, on our lives, which is basically work. The very definition of what we call work is being able to do what brings us joy, and in the process we earn an income, and we're able to support ourselves and our loved ones. Then that is work. Right? I think that as a society, we have to be able to change that perception. And last but not the least, before I talk about the shift, and I want to give you a very specific example. So this is a strategic shift. We talk about digital, and the very premise of digital is the fact that, it is data driven. And data is basically at the first level master data. The master data that has served us on this planet up to this point in time, including yours and mine, okay, that drives every action of ours, is insufficient. So we need a new form of data, and that data needs to be created now by each one of us. It doesn't matter how old we are. I'm 57 years old, and I still need to go back in history to be able to create. Simple thing, if I want to exercise, if I want to be able to understand my physical condition, just in case I happen to have a stroke just now, right? Mm-hmm. Anybody who attends on me needs to have 3 types of data. The person needs to have my heredity data, my congenital data, and my socially acquired conditions of data. This is the basis on which a diagnosis or even an investigation can be ordered, right? But today we don't have that. The second thing is, as a result of that power, the structure, which is basically the power shifting from enterprises to individuals, if we are able to adopt that, you will then find that synergies will shift. So this idea that I can do something, that I can become a creator, this is a creator economy, right? Yeah. It needs the ability for all of us to have a unified view of the values, beliefs, and assumptions, which is what we call culture. Yeah. And this structural shift that results in synergies will then result in us building systems, which we call digital systems. And these digital systems, and I think where I'm contrary to all the narrative that happens is the fact that we continue to believe that there will be jobs. We have to make a distinction between jobs and work. We can't keep saying you can do what you want to do and yet define a requirement and get people to come in and just execute that, right? Mm-hmm. You cannot expect organizations to sign, I'm sorry, I'm carrying coal to Newcastle now. Vishpala, in your organization or any other organization where you build intellectual property, but when you work with Philips, it belongs to Philips, right? So these are very inherent contradictions of the way in which we live life on this planet, right? We need to be able to shift some of these ideas and shape our structures, synergies, and systems. So this is fundamentally important. And this is where I really want to bring in Giga. Even though, it's a long story of how my company was named Giga, but nevertheless, I just happened to use it. But let me tell you, the idea of gigger is neither temporary work, nor gig work, nor any of the work. We look at it as work. And while I was narrating the future of work to a investor, and I gave him a sports example. And bingo, it just occurred to me that why am I struggling with the tech industry and people at work who do not have the ability to embrace their arms around this term called aspiration? And to me, the easiest part was basically to shift to sports. So I said, we are going to get into the future of work from the area of sports. Right? And even today, there are many VCs who don't understand this concept that sports is one of the spheres of life. Right? There are many people who will succeed in becoming sportsmen, but a majority of them, right, who do not succeed in becoming a player can always be part of that ecosystem, right? Many of us, and I am a classic example, I was a failed cricketer, a failed tennis player, right? I'm still athletic at this age in my life, but I did not have the opportunity to participate in the ecosystem that I loved, right? But today that opportunity is available, right? And this is where I actually want to bring in a very critical factor. So we, from an individual side, we segmented our customer audience, right? And we segmented that and you have mentioned all the other segments, which is the Gen Z from 18 to 25, the Gen Y, which is 25 to 40, the Gen X, which is 40 to 60, and the baby boomer 60 plus.
Yeah.
But we forget the most important segment, which is really the future of workforce, which is actually the 8 to 18.
Right.
And this 8 to 18 is really the ones, the 8 to 18 are the aspirants of the future, right? And the 18 to 25, the Gen Z, need to be channeled to the realities of the current world or the current society, to the ideas of whether it is social justice, whether it is increasing the rate of innovation or sustainability, right? And this is something that they have been born into, and these two segments need to really become that transformative part that enables the other three segments, to realize that, they cannot duct tape, right?
Yeah.
And they have to realign themselves to serve these two. Now, this is where, we essentially talk about how all this comes together, which means that you have to look at the flow of work. And again, one very simple definition of work. There are 5 things that come together when we use the term called work, right? The first one is essentially data. The second one is talent. The third is materials. The fourth is funds, and the fifth is infrastructure. Digital has the capacity and the capability to put this together in a package and distribute it. And it can be executed from anywhere if you do the right definition of that package, right?
Yeah. It's interesting, Subbu. I mean, I think I want to probably also I love the diverse perspective, right? So it's great to have, some observations around how we're untapping 18 to 18 years, right? You brought that point up. You spoke about jobs is not equivalent to work, right? Like how we need to look at that entire flow very, very different. So I wanted to also go back, maybe, I don't know, Jason, Scott, because we're talking about changing expectations, right? Because I think Subbu spoke about how ideas are generating money, right? Versus the reverse, or how expectations of future workers are changing, right? So what do you think, Jason and Scott, like the perspective that Subbu has shared? And of course, I spoke about the Great Resignation. So if you kind of look at the whole piece, how do you feel? I mean, do you think people are making more and more bold career choices? What do you think is going to happen in this future?
Yeah, I think it's happening now. I think people are choosing, even before COVID, they were choosing flexibility over the job. So I think they're choosing, before, I think people put their life around work and mostly life around their career. Most of, at least my generation, you aspire to join a company and progress up. Now the workers, maybe not obviously at the 18 phase, but they think that way. They think about digital. They view digital as a complement to what they do. They look at digital channels, so more chat versus talk. And they also have higher expectations of that instant gratification for whatever they are. So those are the future consumers of brands, but that's also the future, workforce. And I think they're going to always choose now to put work around their life. Now, where that rubber meets the road in terms of aspirations of going to bigger things, but they view themselves more as entrepreneurs. They want to control their destiny. They want to own their path. And they're forward thinking. And so, and they don't view their age as a limit to that status, where I think 20 years ago, you would have said, oh, you have to have the battle scars and you've got to put in your time to get it. So it's already happened. So I don't really view it as the future of work. I actually think it's been going on. It just, the world got a wake up call in a very unfortunate way. But so now I think everyone has to adapt. And by the way, if you're not offering that flexibility, or if you're not thinking through how to digitally enable and make that a better experience, whatever that is, with better tools, better data, better platform, better channel, someone else is. And so your competitive advantage, your brand name no longer will just win the day. And so I think that's, every company is wrestling with that. I think it's under the COVID of like, when do we come back to work and what's the hybrid and all of this? It's, I think you're going to have to think quicker. I think the world has moved faster, and also the supply and demand has moved faster in terms of what consumers need and what brands need and companies need. So it's moving fast.
If I can jump in, I think there were some really interesting points about the nature of work, the nature of jobs and careers. I think they're all very interesting points. I will say, I do think that companies tend to focus, or the conversations tend to focus more on younger or early career people, coming out of university and attracting that talent. I actually believe that the flexibility of hybrid work will also mean we see people later in their career engaging and adding their value and their talent and their experience to organizations in new ways, because they can from any planet. So I think we'll see that too. So I think it's absolutely essential to think about early career folks, but not to write off folks that are later in their career. They may adapt and contribute in new ways.
You are hitting it head on. Our average age on our platform is 38 years old. Mostly college educated, and 90% have CX experience. They're a seasoned person who's got different life experiences, and also, as healthcare continues to get better across the world, the adoption of technology and making it easier. I think Jason's dead on. I think and Sub hit it as well, in terms of like, it's 18 to 80. To be quite honest, because there's more people who are saying, hey, I don't want to do that normal job, but I'm still willing and able, and we can bring the work with technology. We can bring it to you. So I think Jason's dead on. I don't think it's just the younger generation who's enjoying that flexibility.
I have one other point I just want to add very quickly, which is that I think I agree that the gig economy will grow, and there's absolutely a place for that. But I want to, when you talk about ideas raising money, you also have to remember that a critical component of ideas is creativity, creating spaces and time and teams of people who can be creative. And creativity is inhibited when people can't interact with ease. And also, I think the nature of the relationship that people have will be a critical part of how that creativity evolves. So I think companies have really got to rethink what is the idea engine for our organization? Where is that? How are we stimulating a culture and an environment where those ideas can flourish?
You made a great point, Jason, and I just want to quickly add to that. In fact, this is what it is. So when we have the 4 parts of the flow of work, right, which is workforce transformation, leads automatically to workplace transformation, because there is a demand for a different kind of work. Now, these 2 kinds of transformations must then be and if you look at the 5 elements I talked to you about, how work is created, planned and created and distributed in order to be executed, then you have orchestration of work operations and innovation. The struggle that we have been facing for I don't know, the last 60, 70 years of how to be both productive as well as profitable at the same time, right? I think that this is the flow of work, right? That needs to get transformed in unison. It cannot be done one at a time or even sequentially. It has to be done concurrently. And I think I just want to agree with both Scott as well as Jason to say that the 60 plus, are essentially the baby boomers are to a large extent not relevantly skilled, to the demands of the digital economy. So there is a great opportunity for them to learn and to become relevant, to how they are able to serve in the ecosystem, not as main players, but really as a cast that enhances the drama of how we unfold this future of work.
Great. Great conversation. I know we just have a few more minutes to wrap it up. So maybe my last question, Akhila, back to you, is that while we've spoken a lot about these 3 dimensions and I think newer demographics that need to be tapped into, I wanted to bring the business linkage, right? At the end of the day, each one of you come from a business sort of point of view. Is there an opportunity that organizations are looking to in the sense of newer business models, products? I don't know, can we talk a little bit about here is the future of work? And we spoke about what does it mean for every company, every individual, but what is the business linkage? Does this mean more opportunity, more innovation for different products and solutions? Maybe Akhila, over to you and then anybody else can add.
Sure. No, Vishwala, I think that's a great note to close on because I think the reality is companies exist for business, right? And they're not there to please employees to start with. They want to get business done. And I'm not sitting judgment on what's gone right or wrong, but the facts of the case is today you take any company in India, the profits have only gone up. Their growth trajectories are out of the charts, right? So everybody's growing very, very rapidly. They're extremely profitable. So something they're doing right? And it's time to actually poke in and start finding out what's working, what's not. I think the companies that have been agile around this problem have really looked at what parts of their work can be done remotely. We've all been through this 20 years ago, when we started talking about distributed work. It's coming back to us in a similar fashion, saying, what is it that we really don't care where it gets done, right? But do we have the right oversight over that work? Also in terms of not only performance, but also productivity and also data privacy, right? We're talking of so many financial services companies in India. I'm partial to that space. I keep going back. But fact is that they worry crazy about the privacy of the data, right? And they want to make sure that's protected. So so people are evolving around their fundamental business processes and are figuring out solutions. If data tells me, if I look at their profits, if I look at their growth, I want to believe they're getting some things right? And they know what they're getting wrong. They will find a way out of it. And, all kinds of solutions and experimentation is happening. It's going to be fun to, sit on the wall and watch this. But there are companies who are actually saying that, it's not like I'm trying to save money on rentals by closing down large offices. I want to create 10 for every one I'm shutting down, but in smaller towns in India where my employees come from, right? I know of companies who are trying that. So this is not the end. We're going to see so much fun experimentation happening, and there's going to be no single solution. I think we just have to be open to trying out new things, listen to each other about what's working, what's not working, and all of that can't be all done remotely. I think there is a lot of room for physical interactions here. We just have to be sensible, pragmatic about what's possible, and make the best of what we have, right? And I hope that's the way we'll find our solutions. Right?
Sure.
Can I just add?
Yeah.
Can I just add a point? I think that's very powerful, especially around real estate. Also imagine we have a climate crisis that we're trying to address.
Yes.
And I think the expectation that people have to travel or live in a specific city to do their best work, I think that idea has been busted. And I think as companies reassess their real estate portfolio, they'll be thinking about sustainability as well.
Absolutely.
Awesome. I think we can, I think we're on time, and I think we can continue dialoguing on this passionate topic. It's so evident that we have these four panelists who are all like for it for the future. But just to probably bring it home and summarize some takeaways for our audience is that um, there's lots to be done. So I think I heard Akhila say that, there's lots of experimentation. So it's an exciting phase, right? That's kind of coming out very evidently. And if you kind of traverse that path, we spoke about, like Jason, you spoke about this whole augmented reality, right? Like, which is going to be different for us in the future. You painted those scenarios for us. Scott, you spoke a little bit about, hey, the gig economy is not you. We've been doing this for many years. But what's probably new is that it's just being accelerated across maybe all industries, all companies, all individuals. And but still we're not able to probably keep match to the supply, right? Like, where companies are still falling short of the workforce that they're trying to hire. And then I think, Akhila, you probably said, yeah, physical is still needed, right? From a workplace, it will be hybrid, but you have to beat that together between digital and the sort of physical sort of ecosystem. And then, Subbu, you came in and said, yeah, there are dependencies, but there are lots of things beyond that. So can we not just think about these traditional, three boxes that I was trying to do? You took it to the next level about work itself, right? What motivates people, the ability for people to probably create, right? I think you spoke a little bit about the dependence of data, right? Like, how is that going to help us, as well as tapping into the right segments? You spoke about, are we really missing out by looking at the 8 to 18-year-olds? While I think Jason and Scott spoke about the mid-careers or people who are in the 60 plus years. So as we talk about the workplace and workforce, like, are we really broadening our horizon on people we want to tap into? And then in the end, I mean, it has to all probably make business sense. So we have to balance the organization, the individual, and the commercial sort of business sense. So yeah, exciting times. I don't think we have concrete sort of answers, and I love the examples, right? I made like some notes of e-commerce coexisting. It just makes it so real. So great. With that, I mean, thank you so much to my four panelists. Thank you to the NASSCOM team. So over to you, Shreya.
Thank you, Vishpala.
Thank you so much, Vishpala. What an enthralling session. A look into the three deeply connected dimensions of an organization on the future of work: the workflows, and the workplace. A few priorities for the hybrid model: break the physical and the digital world, flip between open and enclosed places, and of course, the fluid nature of work. The choice is with the human, and they want flexibility in their lives. And that seems to be the central core of all of the changes that are taking place in our current. Driven by disruption, enabled by technology, the workforce of tomorrow.